I just spent a year of my life trying to secure a free vacation at Universal Studios from timeshare scammers. Along the way, they tried to bribe me for my silence and even went as far as to offer me dollars so I would just stop calling them. This is my story. Look, I love scams, and since I'm not famous enough yet to start my own, diving into other people's dirty work has become one of my favorite pastimes. To shooting the half-court shot and missing, to flying across the ocean to legally gamble, I've encountered all kinds of scams. And surprisingly, the most frustrating and intricate one I've come across wasn't via text message pig butchering scam or new influencer product, but inside of a promo tent at a 5K designed for dogs. It was at Tom McCall Waterfront Park during a grant event called Doggy Dash, where I was called over to try my luck at a free trip to Las Vegas. And I don't know if it was my crippling gambling addiction or just love of free things, but there was no way I could have said no to that guy calling me over to that tent. So I approached the booth, confirmed that I was over the age of 25, and they handed me 2 giant wooden dice. And I rolled doubles on my very first try. I won. And not just a trip to Las Vegas, but an even more enticing getaway to LA to go to Universal Studios for free. Home of Super Mario World, Jurassic Park, and this guy. And better yet, all I had to do to get my free vacation was give them a $40 deposit and attend a timeshare presentation with the company Vacations International. In my defense, they said that refund was totally refundable. And all I had to do was prove that my girlfriend and I made over $50,000 collectively. But wait, it can't be that simple. It sounds too good to be true, right? Well, yeah, that's because it is. And if you're thinking, oh, well, it's a timeshare, of course it's a scam. You're not alone. I mean, timeshares don't have the best reputation.
Tonight about timeshares. People looking to sell their vacation homes promised a quick sale. That never happens.
Families right here in Northeast Ohio out thousands of dollars.
Also new at 6 tonight, 3 people have pleaded guilty to a multi-state timeshare resale scam.
Sue McConnell with the Cleveland Better Business Bureau says more timeshare owners are reporting these kinds of scams.
So yes, Vacations International is a timeshare company, but they make sure to advertise themselves as one of the good ones. Even on the first page of their website, there's an entire section that reads, VI Resorts is an owner-controlled vacation club dedicated to providing memorable experiences with choice and flexibility. Yeah, and flexibility is key. According to the timeshareauthority.com, and who am I to question the authorities, the company is actually credited with developing the very first timeshare point system, which is an innovation that would change the landscape of timeshares going forward. And I didn't really know how to segue into the history of VI, so I'm just gonna do a hard cut to me pretending to be a reporter because I think it's kind of funny. For VI Resorts, it all started in the 1950s when Robert Burns, alongside 5 other families, squeezed 25 people into one cabin in Washington that they jointly purchased. That initial purchase is what gave Boeing engineers Big Bobby Burns and his partner Bob Rittenberg the idea to start buying up properties on the Hawaiian island of Kauai and selling them as beachfront leasehold condos. That eventually led to the purchase of a 72-unit motel turned 40-year right-to-use timeshare and the birth of Vacations International in 1974. Today, VI claims over 42,000 members with reach across the US and Mexico, fueled by strategic moves such as a $6 million loan from Colebrook Financial and a few controversial mergers, such as one in 2012 with Avia West Resort Club shortly after Burns' passing. At this point in my research, I was skeptical of a few things, all revolving around the same fundamental question. Are VI's claims too good to be true? First off, with reviews like this one from local guide Val, I began to worry that even if I did go on a vacation, it wouldn't be free. Second, they claim that they prioritize choice and flexibility, but you can look up hundreds of reviews claiming the exact opposite, many of which complain that you have to give them a year's notice for any vacation. And third, they're claiming that they are owner-run. What does that mean and to what extent? After all, with their rate of expansion, you'd have to assume that their number one priority above anything else is continuing to get more members and grow more revenue. So what incentive do the 42,000 owners have to continue this rate of expansion? I thought that maybe I could get all of those answers as well as my free trip to Universal after I attended the sales pitch, but buckle up because what I experienced was so much worse than I was expecting, and I was expecting pretty bad. Just look at examples of these sales videos from other timeshare companies.
At the presentation, we were told again that we had qualified for this complimentary travel, right? And then we were asked to pay $150 for that travel. We did pay the money, but instead of getting any kind of complimentary travel, instead we were sent these. Is this a ticket?
These are the certificates from the third-party marketing company.
So is that a ticket? Is that my complimentary travel?
The state received hundreds of complaints alleging deceptive sales practices. And we found multiple civil suits filed against both companies, including one from a former employee who claimed she was told to lie to potential customers to close deals.
All of our clients walk into our sales room going, I don't want to be here. I don't want to buy anything. I'm not interested in what you have to say. And our job is to take that client, completely turn him around, manipulate him, massage him, make him fall in love with us.
You're just like a doctor, a nurse, a fireman, a policeman, a lifeguard. They all save lives.
High sales tactics usually revolve around the idea of making somebody uncomfortable.
Manipulate him.
Making them feel like the only way that they can get out of the situation is to either give you the sale that you're asking for or something close to it, contact information to a friend or a promise that you'll circle back. And that certainly was the feeling that I had during this pitch that we're about to get into. And you should also know that we weren't allowed to bring any microphones or cameras into the sales pitch, which we weren't going to do anyway because this wasn't going to be a video until the pitch actually happened. I also didn't think that we would get bribed to not post anything on social media after it concluded. On top of that, Washington, where we did this, is a two-party consent state, and I am a law-abiding citizen, which by the way means I can't really go full spy fox and wear a wire without the other person knowing. But they didn't say I couldn't take rigorous notes and recreate it using my new friend Miguel on Fiverr. So when I show you this recreation of the sales pitch, just know that everything is alleged and definitely not a legal accusation. So please don't sue me.
It had been about 2 weeks since I wrote those dice, and it was finally time to get my free vacation. I was admittedly nervous as we drove to the large, nondescript office building mysteriously lacking any signage whatsoever, but we approached the mirror-like door nonetheless. After a minute or two, we were buzzed in and asked by the person at the front desk to flash them a major credit card. So I did. I think they do this to prove that you have enough credit or income to actually purchase what they're going to try to sell you. And once all my credit card information was stolen, we were left sitting in a waiting room where there was an old TV playing what looked like an early 90s ad for a Hawaiian resort on repeat. I guess to get us in the mood for vacationing or something like that. And we weren't the only people waiting, but we were some of the lucky few who actually made it into the presentation. There was a woman who was forcefully escorted out because she came alone instead of with a partner. After that, everyone was just sitting in silence waiting for them to bring us to the next stage of this pitch. And that took about 10 minutes or so before we were led into a large conference room where we got our first look at the setup. There were about 8 separate tables, snacks, water, food, loud music, all the things that you'd expect from a timeshare pitch. More importantly though, there were 4 salespeople circling the room like sharks, with one main sales manager standing in the front of the room. And one of those sales guys, I forgot his name, so let's just call him Zach. A big buff dude with a poorly done photorealistic tattoo of his daughter covering his entire upper arm led us to our table and explained that if we so much as looked at our phones, we would be kicked out. When we sat down, he sat with us. And then he asked us to latch our chairs together, because for some reason, the chairs had little latches that stuck together like a mini bench. He told us this was to foster unity during the pitch, but honestly it felt more like a tactic to keep us from fleeing. The first thing that he had us do was individually fill out some surveys that asked where our dream vacation was and how many vacations we take a year, things like that. As soon as we finished, Zach made sure to let me know that if I didn't want to lose my girlfriend who was sitting right next to me, I needed to make sure to take her everywhere on her list. And she didn't refute that, but honestly at this point, everything was what we expected it to be, besides that whole latch chair situation. We talked to Zach for probably 10 more minutes before it was time for the main event. GM of that location and sales manager, Greg. His pitch was probably a little over a half an hour, but it was definitely the most fun part of what became a really long and disturbing experience. He started off by showing us pictures of the properties that they own, and for whatever reason pointed out during a particular slide that his grandchild was actually conceived in the very suite that we were looking at. Greg, why did we need to know that? During this, Greg was writing on a whiteboard describing the deadly costs of taking vacations without the help of a service like VI Resorts. He was explaining that people die sooner, they're hard to give out, all these terrible things happen if you don't take enough vacations per year. And I think Greg forgot to get some erasers before the pitch because he ended up using an entire unrolled paper towel roll to wipe the numbers off the board before we could get a good look at what he was even trying to communicate. But he did throw in something really interesting that we'll get to later about how you can actually just take loans out with VI so you don't need to worry about your credit score. And he told us a bunch of different anecdotal stories, my favorite of which is how his first wife actually divorced him because he took camping instead of on a real vacation. Look, Greg, man, I'm not sold that was the only reason. But the cherry on top was his dramatic 10-minute story about his blue-collar father who worked nonstop, never with the family, always with the job, always with the phone, ended up getting very sick, and on his deathbed looked him in his eyes, and his last words were, I wish I would have taken more vacations with you. Come on, there's just no way that happened. Once Greg finished up with his sitcom interpretation of a timeshare presentation, we were tossed back to Zach, who began getting into the numbers with us. And don't worry, I'll break those down later on. But just know they were so crazy and predatory that I let out a tiny laugh, which I could tell kinda hurt Zach's feelings. He let out a little whimper and was like, oh man, why are you laughing at me? And when I explained to him how the numbers he gave me made no sense, he just threw his arms up in the air and said, I don't know, I'm not the numbers guy. And that was really the last time we got to speak to Zach, because they began rotating the salespeople to other couples in the room. And our next guy was pretty quick with us. He asked me if I was just in it for the free trip, and I said yes, and he was like, okay, and left shortly after. But that interaction triggered our final boss, the closer, an older man whose name I will never forget, Jerry. Jerry, who looked like a more geriatric version of the KFC guy fused with the stock photo guy, started off fine, with him asking Juliana several times about what she did for work. I'm guessing that he was trying to prove that she actually had income, and once he was happy with that, he continued to talk nonsense to us for a while, nothing really relating to the timeshare. At some point, he shared some strange picture he took years ago of the moon and asked us if we'd like to see where he took it from, finally segueing back into the timeshare pitch. But where Jerry went wrong was when he was leaving our table, because he looked at me and he said, lots of my coworkers have been talking about your hair. Yeah, I like it. You know what? If I had your hair back in my day, I'd have been lynched. And walked away. We were a bit sunlocked and talked to each other about what else he could have said, but ultimately determined that we could not have both misheard him. And Juliana rightfully wanted to talk to the sales manager immediately, but there was one little problem. We didn't have our flight certificates yet, and I came for a free trip. Being told my hair should get me lynched or not, I'm going on a free trip. About 15 minutes later, a guy approached us with some papers containing trip information, and I quickly realized I was getting rerouted and they were not in fact going to provide me any trip details on this day, but instead give me a certificate to redeem with another company and new villain, Casablanca Express. I'll get into the ridiculous requirements to actually take the trip in a little bit, but before we could leave, we did feel compelled to mention what Jerry had said to the sales manager, Greg. And honestly, I never could have guessed his reaction. When we told him what happened, he said, oh my, that's terrible. Who said that to you? Was it Jerry? We were both a little shocked that he knew who it was before we even told him who actually said it, but we confirmed it was Jerry, and he responded, well, he's of another time, and he's probably gonna die soon anyway, so let's not worry about this too much. You know what? No, hold on. I'm dead serious, by the way. He really said that. And then scurried off into his office, only to emerge a few minutes later holding our true prize, 5 $10 Olive Garden gift cards. It was a miracle. And he made sure to let us know, because when he handed them to me, he actually said, you know what? I'm jealous of you. You're lucky this happened. These are great. Let's just make sure this doesn't go on social media.
Thanks, Greg. Now, this video is not about Jerry and it's not about Greg, but you may or may not be surprised to learn that Jerry has a history of doing things just like this, such as this review from Cheryl from Longview, Washington. In fact, I had a shockingly similar experience to Cheryl. Jerry also had us pull out Juliana's phone, prove that she had some sort of an income, and then harassed us about it because he didn't believe us. And when they complained to Greg, the sales manager, all that he did was say, oh yeah, that's Jerry, he's old and can be inappropriate. It's exactly what happened to me. And checking in with the Better Business Bureau, VA Resorts actually has a B-, while the company we're about to get into, Casablanca, has a B+, which honestly are not nearly as bad as I would expect. That is until you get to the little section of over 200 official customer complaints between the two of them in just the last 3 years alone. Oh, and in case you were wondering how VI even gets away with just giving you a certificate to a different equally toxic travel agency and not really giving you what they promise you, rest assured everything is perfectly legal. After all, VI does in fact give you a certificate that's redeemable for a free vacation, but there's more catches than Michael Thomas had in 2019. And I'm not done talking about Casablanca Express, but I do want to circle back to VI because I really want to understand their business model. So between my conversations with the corporate office, the multiple conversations I had with the local reps, and their public offering statement that they were required by law to have on their website, I was able to put together a good enough picture of how they operate to share with all of you. Okay, so let's start with the requirements to attend a sales pitch. First off, you have to go with a partner. It looked online like there was a few instances where that's not the case, but again, let's look at these reviews where it is very explicitly said that if you don't have a partner, you're not able to go. Second, you have to guarantee that you and your partner collectively make about $50,000, which maybe you could look at that as a safety net. After all, it is somewhat a standard practice in this industry. But if you really just stop and think about it, you'll realize that in absolutely no way is this a safety net for the consumer. It is a bare minimum estimation of the amount of credit that you might be able to apply for, which is a little bit more insidious when you think about who their main audience is. It's really just older folks or lower income blue collar workers just trying to find a way to do something nice for their family or their grandchildren. But when you look at the monthly payments that VI would require you to make, it's almost impossible for these people to do it without taking out loans, which I believe is pretty key here, because VI really just wants to talk to customers who are not financially educated enough to understand that they're going to take out one of the highest interest loans I've ever seen. But okay, enough tiptoeing around it. Let's get into the actual costs. There are 3 tiers of membership at VI: bronze, silver, and gold. And for the low price of $17,049 and a down payment of $4,263, you can get yourself 130 points, which is their entry-level tier. This gets you the esteemed bronze ownership badge. I don't think they really give you a badge, but you get the idea. Silver tier is a bit pricier at around $19,924 for 153 points. But if you want to be like me in Valorant, gold tier, you can pay a whopping $30,940 for, get this, also 153 points.
We have a problem!
But these 153 points are special. You see, they're permanent points, which is a bit unclear, admittedly, because in their public offering statement, they say that bronze tier is 45.5 to 105, silver is 106 to 210, gold is 211 to 315, with platinum at 316 and above, with the caveat that you purchase permanent points. So I think what that means is that you really don't enter into these categories until you pay almost double what they sell you as an initial investment. And you're probably wondering the same thing I was wondering when I was looking into this. What are permanent points even? Well, according to their public statement, the promoter intends
to offer for sale permanent VI points.
I couldn't, no one wants to hear all that. So essentially non-permanent points are just points that expire after the 40-year right to use situation. And don't give me, well, at least they're transparent. No, that's not transparent. Remember when I was just ranting a minute ago about their target customer and how insanely high those interest rates are? The reason I'm so upset about that is because they don't care about your credit, because VI will happily facilitate a loan for you. Isn't that nice? No matter what your credit score is, you get equality. You get the same interest rate of 17.9%. Yeah, you heard me right. 17.9%. That high of an interest rate combined with instant approvals, which they do, definitely targets customers who are not really understanding what that's going to do to them long term, especially when you have such intense, emotionally torturous sales tactics. I should also mention that that's not your only option. You can pay them half of your total investments to get reduced interest, but most people don't have about $8,000, $9,000 to just throw in. And I think what makes this worse is that they don't report the interest earned to credit bureaus. Or at least allegedly. You see, I went back a few months ago to talk to Greg, the sales manager who offered me those Olive Garden gift cards, to just gather a little bit more information. And luckily, he didn't remember me because I was probably the 5th person he'd done that to then that day. But he did let me know that his boss, whose name was Mike or something like that, allegedly just makes a fortune on collecting this interest, which again, that's not illegal. It's just kind of messed up, Mike. And the way that they do this is by using a billing company called Equient. Greg was more than happy to tell me for some reason. I know what you're thinking. Using Equient as a payment processor and collecting that interest, but not disclosing where that money's going probably sounds a little bit illegal, but it's really not. At least probably. I mean, if it is illegal, my bad for ratting, man. Sorry about that.
Snitching.
But really, I just want to leave this here because I'm not educated enough to talk about the fact that the U.S. doesn't require all legal lenders to report to credit bureaus. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it is what it is. If someone can explain that, comment. And I want to dive a little bit more into their point system. And let's refer back to their public offering statement. VI operates as a trust for U.S. properties and Mexican real property trusts for its resorts in Mexico. And like most timeshares, their company is based off right to use rather than actual property ownership, which really complicates the value of resale of your properties. Because even in my sales presentation, VI claimed that after you were done paying off the thing that you bought, whatever price bracket it is, you can just close your account and be done with your timeshare. But that's a little bit complicated because of how these points work. When you purchase a package, regardless of the tier, points are paid out according to the level that you purchased into. And what they do is they allow short-term usage of VI's properties. But there's always a catch. I mean, you don't just keep the points that you purchase, there's a maintenance fee attached to them. Right now, those maintenance fees are $8.80 per point, which are of course subject to increase or decrease, likely increase over time. And these fees must be paid annually regardless of timeshare usage, meaning an owner with 153 points would pay $1,346 a year with the current rates, which you might be thinking maybe that's not too bad. Well, that is until you consider that in most cases, you won't be able to take a vacation your first year, especially because you're not buying permanent points below the gold tier. All that you're really buying is a term of ownership for a term of ownership. And let's say that you do the bronze tier according to their promotional flyer, which is a light investment of $17,049. And let's be generous and say that you can put down that $4,000 down payment right away. You're essentially left with $12,700 and an interest rate of 17.9%, which I don't mean to be nitpicky here, but that's a true total of over $25,000. And with the given monthly payment that they attach, that is a 10-year commitment. What's worse is that that doesn't even factor in your maintenance fees. If you follow the plan and you pay off exactly the amount every month that they recommend, you're going to be paying an extra $11,000 in maintenance fees over that 10-year term. 10 years later, you've paid $39,000 for probably 10 vacations, which funny enough is not even including the owner's nightly tax. And you know what else that doesn't factor in, as I was hinting to just a moment ago, is the reduced advanced reservation waitlist fee, which can vary from $50 to $100 if you want to book a year in advance. You might be wondering, why would you book a year in advance? Why would you have to pay that fee to book if you already own the points for these timeshares? Just quickly revisit all of those reviews complaining that you can't book out before a year. But hey, at least you're an owner.
That's so dumb, it makes me mad.
Because remember what I said? The company is owner run. So you obviously have a say in operations and in how much you're spending, right? I mean, in most companies, being owner run means that they have an elected board that makes decisions. Usually that elected board represents the bigger population so that you're able to actually make good changes to the company. But also, like in most cases, this is just a scam. This is just a facade to make you think that they value you as a customer. All that this really does is give a few people that are owner elected officials the opportunity to come together and pitch things to corporate. On a phone call I had with VI's corporate office, the example that they gave me was recently they changed it so that you are not allowed to have any pets in any of their resorts, which is a little bit odd. I mean, a lot of people bring pets on vacations, but the real reason is because it lowers the deep cleaning fee that they have to do after every single visit. And if you think about that for a minute, all that they did was sacrifice their pet so that they'd have to pay a little bit less on maintenance fees. So VI being owner run really just means that the owners get to beg for lower fees and not much beyond that. I don't know about you, but I trust VI being owner run about as much as I trust Dan Schneider to watch my kids. But enough about VI. After all, they handed me off. I was done with them. I started dealing with another company. The company I keep referencing, Casablanca Express. And my introduction to them wasn't very romantic. I mean, I was leaving a sales pitch with 6 things in my hand, 5 Olive Garden gift cards, and this, which is just a list of the insane requirements I need to fulfill in order to go on my trip. What are those requirements, you ask? Well, let's take a look. There's a lot on here, so I'm just going to cut to the chase. In order to get my free vacation, I have to send them a $100 fully refundable validation deposit that has to be in form of check, money order, or cash, which I did. After that, I have to, send them another $120, $60 per person to cover the taxes that might be taken out of the trip. Surely after $220, my trip would be processed, right? Well, don't get ahead of yourself. Because for the next step, I have to become a salesperson and pitch the company, which makes total sense until you realize you have to pitch on 2 separate dates that are 30 days apart, either a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, and not within 7 days of any federally recognized holiday. Your date range becomes a little bit smaller. And don't get this mistaken, this is not a simple process. This entire thing took me around 7 months. But eventually, after sending out more sketchy money orders than Donald Trump, I was called by a travel agent who told me that my dates were approved.
Yo, I don't think you understand what this means, bro. It might have been a Do you understand what this means?
It was a few months after that when I found myself waiting in a particularly long line at Walgreens, and I thought to myself, I haven't heard back from these travel agency people in months. So why not wait in 2 lines at once? I called, waited on the hold line, and eventually got in contact with this guy named Hal. And he let me know he was in charge of my trip, everything would be perfectly taken care of, and that he would call me back to figure out the details. But he couldn't help right now because things were still processing. You know, these things take time. Be patient, man. I do get a call back from Hal, who let me know that my trip was a huge disappointment and definitely not worth taking. And those are his words, not mine. He let me know that this whole certificate situation was pretty much a scam, but to not worry because he got me. I mean, it was pretty simple, honestly, the way he told it to me. All I had to do was give him an extra $100 and he would make the trip worth taking. Better yet, I could pay him a couple $1,000s to go to an exotic resort overseas. And all I had to do was pay for the airfare.
That is
Although that would mean I was subject to the same rules, they are subject to cancellation at their own will. And you know, as tempting as that was, I decided to stand my ground and stick with my original trip. To say he was shocked would probably be a little bit of an understatement, and he proceeded to paint the most terrible image of a trip I could really imagine. Let me know I'd be leaving on a red-eye flight to maybe LA, probably a few stops in between. After all, it was going to be a budget airline since I didn't want to upgrade. And he made sure to let me know that I wouldn't be alone. I'd be with a bunch of other poor chumps who also fell for the same scam. I mean, he said this was a certificate flight that only left at specific times because they needed to get everyone on board. And I probably wouldn't get there until the morning because when I left at 11, 12, whatever time he told me, we'd have to stop in 4 different places to pick up all those people. And once in LA, I would have to get my own transportation to a probably horrible motel, maybe hotel. I would have one day at Universal before having to drive myself back to the airport and fly out to Universal at 4 a.m. that next morning. And yeah, while the details were a bit alarming, all that I really heard is that I could get this trip. So I said I was in. He let me know I'd be getting in contact with the details of my trip about a month before I left, and then he just hung up. Which is not really what happened. About a month before the trip, I started a mission. A dangerous and regrettable mission to secure my airline tickets. More specifically, just to get any information about this trip I'm allegedly going on. I probably ended up calling them 20 to 30 times, sitting for like 30 to 40 minutes regularly over that month, and literally being hung up whenever I asked for any clarity on what was happening. I mean, one of the people got so frustrated at me just asking for where my trip details were that they said they were going to escalate it to their manager, and it got rerouted to the same person. They obviously just tried to ditch me to dump me off to somebody else. But my prayers were finally answered by my new travel agent, because Hal was removed from my case. Maybe their manager requested that I had some special treatment or something at this point. My new agent, Jonathan, called me and let me know that my trip details were ready to finalize again. But before he did that, he really dug in and emphasized how terrible of an experience this would be for me. He went as far as to try to buy me out of the trip. I'm not joking. They offered me $400 on top of my full deposit back to just stop calling them. And I was a bit confused by this at first. I mean, was I really that annoying? Maybe. But I think the more likely answer is that they didn't expect anyone to do this. They don't expect people to go through the effort to actually get the trip. So that $400 they were offering me would have saved them money, as to not have to actually get me the flights. But that $400 has another purpose, and it's to buy my silence. I mean, literally, when I was talking to Jonathan on the phone, he said, well, we offer this just so you don't leave a bad review. But I was persistent, and I made sure to tell Jonathan, no, I really want to go on this trip. And he told me the same details Hal did about having to go on a red-eye flight, having to go to like 4 different stops, all this other nonsense. But he had an extra twist that the hotel I was going to stay in was actually near Disney, because they didn't have enough people staying near Universal to get the North Hollywood location they usually would. So I'd have to get my own transportation from LAX, drive all the way to Anaheim to get my Universal tickets from an office, and then drive back to North Hollywood and able to go to Universal. Of course I was still in. And at this point, it was probably just under 2 weeks until my trip. He told me that I would have my details and my finalized information by the next Monday. And when that didn't happen, I began to call back again, even more frequently. And after getting hung up on, being called stupid, transferred to empty lines, I eventually got through to somebody 3 days before my trip. I let them know I had absolutely zero confirmation, but they assured me
Everything gonna be airy.
regardless of my concerns, I would have everything on time. And when I asked them, what happens if I don't receive anything on time? They literally hung up the phone. So who are these masters of customer service? Who is Casablanca Express? Well, Casablanca Express started in the 1980s as tour bus operators. They initially offered midweek trips to Las Vegas, Tahoe, and Reno. And their founders worked quick to establish connections with hotels, resorts, different agencies. They grew quickly in the 80s, amounting 35 tour buses that traveled excited tourists between Las Vegas and different locations. And they no longer operate tour buses, but they still remain a small family-owned business. They also note on their website that they have an A on the Better Business Bureau, but I mean, they don't. They have B, like, it's not even A- really, like, and they have a pretty close relationship with a lot of different timeshare companies. I mean, they found out that just taking in a bunch of people who want timeshares and upgrading their trips is a pretty effective way to make money. But they don't really have the best relationship with all their Timeshare friends. After all, they sued Wyndham in 2010, which is evidence that when they're called out for their shady business practices, they're like, oh no, not us. But then they continue to work with equally as evil companies. But enough about that. Let's get to the trip. To my surprise, I did receive my tickets 16 hours before I was supposed to go. And remember, this was on a Wednesday. So that entire week, I kept telling my boss, like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll be taking time off. Who knows? I don't know if I have the tickets yet. But honestly, when I got the tickets, that's when everything started to look up. Because that $400 they tried to bribe me with was not the only attempt they had to stop me from leaving a terrible review. The plane tickets were actually a more convenient time, one way all the way to LAX. So I ended up landing in LA around 4 p.m. on Wednesday, which I assume is part of the strategy that they have as collateral to not receive bad reviews from people who don't upgrade. I mean, it's not hard to figure out the certificate flights that they describe to you just don't exist, and they're only there as a scare tactic to try to get you to upgrade. What they actually do, and the reason I didn't get my tickets until like 16 hours before my flight, was they just wait for people to cancel their flight reservations. After all, certificate flight sounds a lot better than just straight up telling you they're trying to find any abandoned seats from the upcoming flights on that day. The secondary wonderful change is that the hotel they put us in was only 7 minutes away from Universal, even though when they emailed me the number for the hotel, it was a completely different hotel in New York, but we're gonna ignore that. And I was pretty excited until I realized they were telling the truth about the hotel. The very first thing that we saw upon pulling up to our little hotel was a human trafficking warning sign. And I'm not joking, a girl outside of a white van in the parking lot crying. I felt like I was in an Always Sunny sketch. This certainly didn't help my nerves. Why was I nervous, you ask? Well, just look at some of these wonderful Google reviews. But let's let me from the trip actually tell you about the hotel. Hey, I'm Elijah. Welcome to Cribs. I am in a hotel-motel situation that Casablanca set up for us, about 15 minutes away from Universal Studios in Los Angeles, California. They gave us the whole deal. I want to give you a little tour. To start off, let's look at the main room. We have a wonderful one-bedroom where we have a bed and several other fantastic amenities, such as this over here. It appears to be a piece of cloth in front or on top of some sort of a hook, as well as a absent fire alarm. But hey, that's all just aesthetics. Fire alarms don't actually work anyway. But what does work is this wonderful sink we have in here. Beautiful speckled paint job on, is that blood? I don't know if that's blood. I don't think it's blood, but it could be. We're gonna ignore that for now. We have a toilet, which is great. We have one of those dual flush situations, but only one of them works, so don't drop too heavy of a load. We do have a shower that may or may not work. And honestly, overall, we had a pretty good day in LA that first day, though not really to the credit of these certificate flights. But the second day got even better, as to my surprise, the tickets worked. So enjoy this little montage of us going around having fun at Universal. We didn't end up staying in that hotel, but we did end up making it here. Also, we didn't really want to leave at 4 a.m. that next day, so we decided just to stay an extra day and go to a Laker game and also an LCS playoff game, which is pretty fun. Probably easy to not think about this while watching the video, but this entire process took nearly a year. Actually, now that I think about it, over a year. I still have my deposit back, and it's 2 months. It's been 14 months. Like, just know I couldn't possibly include every phone call I've had. I couldn't possibly include every bit of communication I had with this company, but it was excruciating. And all just to get what they promised me in the park. What's worse is Casablanca made me forget about how bad VI treated me. After all, they literally bribed me with Olive Garden gift cards, which, to think of it, I think there's one more thing I have to do. So overall, was it worth it? Like, those breadsticks really hit, but I don't think they were worth the trouble that it took to get them. And is this the easiest way to get a free trip to Universal? I mean, maybe, but if you're at home thinking about if you should do this, no, don't, stop. Just please don't do it. It's not worth it. You know what you should do though is like, comment, and share this video if you enjoyed it. And also subscribe to see more like this on the way. But while I have you here, there's a lot of bad in the world today. So in the description, I've attached a couple of charities that are just trying to make the world a little bit better of a place. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time from Tokyo?